The first of our 5 points today will be from John 18, verses 1 to 3, and it will cover Gethsemane's shattered peace. Let's read. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. The Garden of Gethsemane had been a safe haven for Jesus and his disciples, and a place of prayer and unity. But as we know, betrayal can strike at vulnerable moments, yet we can find comfort in Christ, who faced it with grace. Jesus' prayers in this garden prepared him for the trials to come, which should inspire us to seek him in our own places of turmoil. This betrayal, while it was deeply personal, was not outside of God's sovereign plan. When we face personal betrayals, we can trust that God remains in control, working out his redemptive purpose through our trials. Our second point we'll call Jesus' divine declaration, we find in verses 4 through 6. Let's read. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell on the ground. This shows us Jesus' authority when he identifies himself, causes his captors to fall back and fall down. This moment is a reminder of the power that Jesus holds even in his vulnerability. This encourages us to remain steadfast and composed, always trusting in Christ's authority when faced with trials and fears. Despite knowing Judas's intentions, Jesus steps forward to meet his betrayers, displaying calm and control. He's not a passive victim, but a willing sacrifice. This brings us to our third point, which is the disciples' devotion demonstrated. We'll find that in John chapter 18, verses 7 through 9. Let's read. So he asked them again, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, "Of those whom you gave me, I have lost not one." Jesus was dedicated to protecting his disciples and fulfilling his promise that none would be lost. By saying, "Let these go," Jesus secures the freedom of his followers. It's a metaphor for his upcoming sacrificial work on the cross. This reflects his role as the shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep, demonstrating how God's care for us remains constant even in betrayals. We can draw comfort knowing that Christ's sacrificial love secures our safety. This brings us to point 4, which is Peter's passionate protest and a lesson of grace over retaliation. John chapter 18, verses 10 through 11 say, Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? This shows us the futility and pointlessness of lashing out in anger and the importance of embracing God's path of peace even when faced with injustice. Peter's impulsive reaction to defend Jesus contrasts human aggression with divine peace, highlighting human impulses to control outcomes. Peter's sword reflects our own tendencies to retaliate when we are betrayed, while Jesus' response promotes peace over violence. This point can inspire us to choose the path of peace, grace, and love over retaliation, reflecting Christ's ultimate example. This presents a lesson in relinquishing control to God, trusting his sovereign plan instead of relying on our own limited understanding. And finally, point 5 is Jesus' submissive surrender. Verses 12 through 14 read, "So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had advised the Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people." Look at the irony of the arrest that leads to ultimate freedom. Jesus is bound so we can be unbound from sin. Facing the high priests, Jesus is portrayed here both as a prisoner and the ultimate high priest who's interceding even right now for humanity. The religious authorities' actions under God's design initiated events that lead to salvation. This again shows how God's redemptive purpose can use even adversaries' plans to achieve his goals. Christ's humility and willingness to endure injustice for the sake of redemption invite us to embrace humility in service to others. God can transform our darkest moments into part of his redemptive story if we trust his work even through hardship and adversity. Jesus set the example of how to deal with betrayal. The question is, are we willing to follow it?